While 13's team was busy fighting against a fire dragon, Hurakan, the barbarian king, orc king, and troll king, were also duking it out with the magma fiend, Antarius. Unfortunately, the battle wasn't easy because the magma fiend's army didn't hesitate to swarm the three kings and use their bodies as meat shields to prevent them from getting near their intended target. Also, Antarius had one disgusting ability, and that was the ability to split its body into two. Both bodies were real, so even if one of them died, the magma fiend would continue to live. Although it couldn't split its body consecutively, it could do this once every hour, giving the three kings a hard time trying to land a killing blow on its body. Only the troll king, who could move anywhere thanks to the ability of his spear, was able to close the distance. But he didn't dare to go too deep within the enemy's ranks. Due to his surprise attack, he managed to seriously injure the magma fiend, but its minions were able to use swarm tactics in order to push the troll king back, allowing the magma fiend to split itself. The second body distanced itself to the very back of the monster legion, leaving the injured body behind. As much as he wanted to repeat the same strategy, the troll king knew that this would not work a second time. Once he was isolated and surrounded, the other two kings wouldn't be able to save him in time, which would lead to his demise. "We need a strategy," the barbarian king said. "Any suggestions?" "We stab, then we kill," the troll king replied. "But this will not work." "How about you, orc? Any bright ideas?" The orc king, Velos, was not only a mighty warrior, but a great strategist as well. He scanned the surroundings, looking for a way to put down the magma fiend, who was hiding deep within enemy lines. "There is only one way to win this battle," Velos said. "We need to kill these magma fiends at the same time." "Yes, but how?" the barbarian king Iskandar asked. "Joram will use his spear to target the magma fiend at the rear. I know that this is a reckless move, which might endanger your life, but you are really the only one that can do it." The troll king didn't say anything and continued to listen to what the orc king had to say. "You will wait while I and Iskandar charge towards the injured body of the magma fiend. I will focus on killing the monster in front of me, while Iskandar will just focus on killing the injured magma fiend." "You are smart, Joram, so I know that you have a trump card," Velos stated. "So, once you feel that the time is right, hit Antarius hard and hit him fast. After that, escape as fast as you can. Feel free to leave me and Iskandar behind after you complete your mission." The orc king then locked his attention on the magma fiend, who was supposed to be their target. "Any questions?" Velos asked. "None," Iskandar replied. "No more talk," Joram commented. "Let the killing begin." Arthas, General Stark, and the other warriors, who were busy keeping the small fries at bay to allow their kings to handle the general of the enemy's army, felt the sudden tension that hung in the air. It was as if their kings were about to do a do-or-die strategy, making all of them have solemn expressions on their faces. "Kill!" General Stark roared after he finished killing a giant salamander. "Give our allies some breathing space. Take the injured at the rear. Those who can still fight, rally to me." The races of the Valbera archipelago were now fighting side by side, but even then, the enemies they were facing seemed endless. The ogres, who were the strongest among all the races, had acted as the vanguard, swatting away the weak monsters, who were jumping at them from every direction. The trolls, who were all-around warriors, specializing in close and range combat, used their bows and arrows to launch a barrage behind enemy lines. Arthas, who was fighting back-to-back with Netero, wanted to believe that there would be an end to this madness, but as the battle progressed, it was just getting harder and harder to fight and breathe due to the fumes and flames that were flaring up all over the battlefield. That was when Arthas and Netero saw it. The three kings began to enact their plan, with the orc king at the front, brandishing his axe like a butcher, cutting through the enemy formation using brute strength. Iskandar and Joram ran behind him, conserving their strength and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. To the kings, Arthas, who somehow managed to understand what their kings were about to do, shouted, "Help them carve a path. Kill!" General Stark, who heard Arthas shout, glanced in the direction where their kings were and raised his sword. Break through, General Stark shouted. Use force if you have to. Charge! Charge! Now that they had a direction to go, the ogres, who were at the front, became crazed juggernauts who bulldozed their way towards the magma fiend. The ogres at the front were rank 5 and rank 6 alpha monsters, so their strength was nothing to scoff at. They were the pride of the ogre army, and, with their momentum, the other armies followed behind them. Their plan was simple. They would divide the enemy's army, preventing them from helping the magma fiend as their kings went for the kill. After 20 grueling minutes, the Orc King managed to close the gap between its target and unleashed a slash that cleaved everything in front of him in half. Now, Velo shouted. Joram jumped on the Orc King's shoulder before jumping a second time. As he shot up in the air, he locked gazes with the magma fiend at the very rear of the monster army and gritted his teeth. The Troll King burned a bit of its life force to raise his rank by 1 stage for a brief moment. It was originally a rank 7 sovereign, but due to its desperate power-up, Joram stepped into the rank 8 sovereign rank in a heartbeat. With a roar filled with determination, the Troll King staked its life on the line for one decisive moment. Oblivion Rush. The Troll King spun in the air, creating a tornado that was shrouded in lightning. It shot towards a magma fiend at the back of the formation like a railgun, intending to destroy his enemy with one strike. Iskandar, who had also jumped up in the air with his sword held high, unleashed his strongest attack that could split even an entire mountain range in half. Similar to Joram's strategy, this was an all-out or nothing killing blow that would not give the magma fiend a chance to escape or split its body apart. Bloody Descent. A bloody crescent blade erupted as Iskandar slashed down. The two kings had timed their attack perfectly, taking the magma fiend by surprise. Both attacks split the Magian cores in the magma fiend's body. Ending its life is what was supposed to happen. However, things didn't end up the way the three kings wanted. After Antarius' Magian cores were destroyed, it created a powerful sucking force that sucked in everything within a 200-meter radius around them. The Barbarian King, Orc King, and Troll King were caught by the suction power. Although they did everything in their power to escape, they were unable to break free from the force that had held them in place. The two destroyed Magian cores then flew towards each other, as if attempting to merge together one last time. The Barbarian King, Orc King, Troll King, and the monsters that were also sucked up by the two destroyed cores could only watch helplessly as they collided with each other. A moment later, a powerful explosion detonated, sending a shockwave that blew away everything within its immediate area of effect. A fiery mushroom rose towards the sky as Antarius' self-destruct ability activated and decimated everything in its surroundings. Arundel, who was watching the battle from afar, smirked, not caring for the loss of one of its generals. "You did well, Antarius," Arundel said as he took a step forward. "Leave everything else to me." The blast had not only mortally wounded the three kings, it also decimated a quarter of the enemy's combined forces that were near the radius of the explosion. Now that 3 of the 5 hindrances had been dealt with, it was time for Arundel to land the killing blow and ensure that no one else would be able to threaten his life in the Valbera archipelago. The three kings and the monsters, who had been pulled by the powerful attraction of the magma fiend's 2 Magian cores, were either killed or seriously wounded. Since both copies of the magma fiend's body were real bodies, the 2 cores merged back together at the point of death, creating a powerful explosion that shook the entirety of the Valbera archipelago, which resulted in an earthquake that spread across its 3 islands. The 3 kings, who barely survived the explosion, lay at the center of a giant crater, unable to move completely. It was at that moment that they heard a voice filled with malice, making their bodies shudder once they realized whom the voice belonged to. "That was a worthy sacrifice, Antarius. You didn't fail me until the bitter end." King Iskandar turned his head to the side and saw the 4-meter-tall Magian, who was all looking at them with a mocking gaze. Arundel had a muscular body, and his skin was a deep shade of crimson. The most notable features of the Magian prince were his 2 blazing horns and red eyes that seemed to glow even in the darkness. However, before any of the 3 kings could do anything, Arundel casually trudged toward the Troll King and pierced the latter's chest with a flame spear. The Troll King, who had heroically killed the magma fiend from behind the enemy lines, died a pitiful death under the hands of the Magian Prince, who had decided to come out of hiding and end their lives. The Orc King mustered all of his strength in an attempt to prop himself up. But, just as he was about to raise his body, Arundel summoned a flaming sword and severed the Orc's head in one clean strike. It will be annoying to find someone to replace Antarius, but that's fine, Arundel said as he grabbed the hair of the Barbarian King and raised him high up in the air with one hand. It's just a shame that all of you chose to defy me. The Barbarian King spat on the Magian Prince's face as his last form of defiance toward the monster who was about to kill him. I planned to kill all of you quickly as a sign of respect for your courage, but I changed my mind, the Magian Prince sneered. Let's see how well you burn. Arundel used his other hand to grab the Barbarian King's neck and started to set his body ablaze. He had no intention of killing the Barbarian King right away. Torturing him slowly was more entertaining. The Magian Prince looked forward to hearing the Barbarian King scream and plea for forgiveness, but instead of that, he only got a laugh from King Iskandar. I'll reserve a place for you in hell, King Iskandar said after laughing out loud. A coward like you doesn't deserve to be called a Magian Prince. Out of anger, Arundel intensified the power of his flames, burning the Barbarian King to a crisp. From beginning to end, he didn't see the scene that he wanted to see, making him very annoyed. He tossed the body that had turned to charcoal to the side and watched it shatter the moment it landed on the ground. Arundel then burned the bodies of the Troll King and Orc King as well, making sure that their existences would disappear completely. That was how 3 kings of the Valbera archipelago died, and their people could only watch it happen from afar. Due to the explosion, the army was blown away by the shockwave, receiving various levels of injuries. Arthas and Netero received moderate injuries. They were among the first few people to recover and had seen how their king died in the hands of the monster that was hailed as the Destroyer. I'll give you all a choice, Arundel declared. Surrender and submit to my rule, or turn to ashes. The armies, who had seen the death of their kings, were shaken and unable to give a proper reply. They could feel how powerful Arundel was, and it was enough to make them feel that there was no chance of winning. But just as everyone was despairing, a childish voice reverberated in the surroundings, catching everyone's attention. Arundel, how does it feel to grovel at the feet of Celestial, just so you can keep your pitiful life? The Magian Prince frowned as he scanned the surroundings to check where the voice was coming from. You shouldn't be called Arundel the Destroyer. You should be called Arundel the Groveler. It was then when Arundel's gaze landed on the human boy mounted on top of a nightmare black hound and was looking at him in disdain. Without even waiting for the 7-year-old to shout a third time, the Magian Prince pointed his finger in 13th's direction and fired a fireball in his direction. Blackie, run, 13 ordered. The nightmare black hound, who was already thinking about the same thing, sprinted in order to avoid the fireball, which landed dozens of meters away from him. But before Blackie could even celebrate for dodging an attack that could have burned it to a crisp, dozens of fireballs rained down in its direction, making it run faster. Can't you aim properly? 13 shouted. I guess I can't expect anything from Coward. Blackie barked bitterly, telling Zion to stop angering the monster who could easily turn the both of them into meat paste. But instead of stopping, the boy continued to hurl insults at Arundel, making the latter focus all of its attention at him. Just as Blackith thought that it had already distanced itself from its enemy, Arundel stomped his right foot forward and hurled himself into the air. He then transformed into a giant fireball, flying in 13th's direction. *T. 13 cursed when he saw the fireball that was about to hit them from behind. Blackith, run faster. Knowing that its life was on the line, Blackith channeled all of its strength into its legs and sprinted faster than it ever did in its lifetime. Due to the sudden burst of speed, the giant fireball landed over a dozen meters behind them. But its impact was still strong enough to cause a shockwave that blew 13 and Blackie away, dismounting the 7-year-old from his trusty hound. The explosion had blown 13 off from Blacky's back, making the boy wince in pain. He could feel the searing heat in his surroundings, and he knew that Arundel was just dozens of meters away from him. "Who did you call a coward, boy?" The Magian Prince walked toward the fallen boy's direction with a devilish smile on his face. "My old man," 13 replied, as he propped himself up from the ground. "I call my old man a coward." Arundel sneered. "Is that so? Well, time for you to die then." The Magian Prince then pointed his finger at the 7-year-old and unleashed a fireball that was the size of a car. He might look calm on the surface, but 13's words affected him, especially the part where the child talked about how groveled and begged one of the Celestials to spare his life. This happened hundreds of years ago, which was also the reason why Arundel had developed a habit of only making his move when he was certain that he had a 100% chance of winning. The fear of death had made him a coward, and even he knew of it. However, admitting that he was a coward and people calling him a coward were two different things. As a Magian Prince, he had a dignity and honor to preserve, and those who dared defame him would only have one ending, and that is a fiery death. An explosion erupted on the location where 13 was standing earlier, making his allies' faces turn grim. However, instead of being happy, Arundel frowned because the boy didn't die from his attack. No, a creature emerged from the ground and swallowed the boy whole before burying itself once more. Using his exceptional abilities, Arundel detected the heat signature that was coming off from Rocky's body, making the latter smirk. "You can run, but you can't hide," Arundel said as the tip of his finger blazed intently as he aimed for the fleeing magma Balboa under the ground. After a few seconds, a fiery laser beam erupted from the tip of the Magian Prince's finger, which cut Rocky's body in half. Rocky roared in pain, not expecting that the Magian Prince could still attack it even though it was moving deep underground. Using the last of its strength, it rose up to the surface and spat the young boy from its mouth before its body fell with a loud crash. Tiona hissed, telling her first subordinate to open its eyes, but the magma Balboa lay unresponsive. A few seconds later, Rocky's body slowly merged with the ground, disappearing completely. 13 felt an ache in his heart after seeing what had happened to Rocky, but he didn't have the leisure to stand still. He did the only thing that he could do, and that was to run as fast as he could, to where his allies were located. Due to the thick smoke that was in his surroundings, he was unable to see properly, but he instinctively knew where to run because he had placed a tracking rune on the flag that he had placed at the center of his formation. That was the place where he needed to go, and that was where he ran with all of his might. Arundel laughed as he unleashed another fireball in the 7-year-old's direction, enjoying his desperate attempts to escape. 13 could only see something bright approaching him from behind because his surroundings suddenly lit up, making him grit his teeth. Suddenly, from the smoke that blocked his vision, something big ran past him. "O2!" 13 shouted because he recognized one of his slaves, whom he had brought to the battlefield with him. The ogre gave the boy a sidelong glance and looked at him directly in the eyes. Time seemed to have stopped for a brief moment as their gazes met. "I'll leave the rest to you, Master," O2 said before raising its steel shield in an attempt to block the fireball that was meant to kill his master. 13 didn't treat O2 well, but he didn't treat it badly either. The ogres were known for their arrogance and brutality, so they didn't really feel any loyalty towards the 7-year-old. The only reason they obeyed the 7-year-old was because they feared Giga Chad's stink spray, making them unable to defy him. But as time progressed, 13 slaves understood that their master might be their race's only chance for survival. For this reason, they took this war very seriously, resolving themselves to die for his sake if needed. Another powerful explosion erupted behind 13, sending the younger boy rolling on the ground due to the force of its impact. Due to the force of the explosion, the smoke was momentarily dispersed, revealing something burning in the distance. It was none other than O2's steel shield, which was melting at a rapid pace. Right beside, it was a green monster core, which belonged to the ogre that had sacrificed itself to save its master. 13 clenched his fists tightly due to the emotion of pain that he felt in his chest. The reason why he gave his slaves random names like O1, O2, T1 and T2 was because he didn't want to form any attachments to them. He wasn't like Christopher, who would break down just because his slave monsters had died. No, 13 wasn't that kind of person. He had seen how his hosts die one after the other, so he knew that pain more than anyone else. However, after becoming human, the feelings that he wouldn't normally feel for mere slaves rose up to the surface. While 13 was trying to regain his composure, a pair of powerful arms grabbed his body and raised him high up in the air. 1. 13 saw his other ogre, who didn't even bother to say anything to him, take a throwing stance. 1 gave a mighty roar before throwing 13 as far as it could in the direction he was running earlier, allowing him to escape the second fireball, which descended on the ogre a few seconds right after he had thrown his master to safety. 13 heard and saw the explosion as he was flying in the air, making his vision blur a bit due to the tears that fell from his eyes. Just as he was about to fall on the ground, a shadowy whip coiled itself around his waist, pulling him to the arms of the drow, who had accompanied him into battle. But before Adira could even do anything, she saw a flash of light that was traveling in her direction at great speeds. Arundel had once again used the fiery laser that he had used to attack Rocky from the ground. But before the attack could hit, the Ogre King appeared in front of them and used its bone club to block the attack. It had seen how the two ogres tried to defend the boy, disregarding their lives to save him. "Go," the Ogre King ordered. "I'll take him on." "You mean we will take him on?" The Tigerkin King landed beside the Ogre King and glared at the Magian Prince. "Let's see who kills him first." The Ogre King snorted before charging toward Arundel, with his bone club ready to strike. The Tigerkin King didn't want to be outdone, so he also sprinted fearlessly towards their enemy. They were the only thrones who had the ability to defeat Arundel, so they had no choice but to work together and hope that a miracle would happen. King Gamara and King Atlas charged at the Magian King with their weapons at the ready. Although they were a distance away, they had seen that the kings, whom they had considered as their rivals, had already perished in Arundel's hands. But instead of being afraid, this only made them angrier, so they didn't hesitate to attack the monster, who was several times stronger than them. Arundel glanced at the two approaching thrones before shifting his gaze back to the 7-year-old, who was now running away with the help of a drow and her shadow steed. The corner of his lips curled up into a smile, because he knew that no matter where the boy went, there was no way that he would be able to escape his grasp. Arundel didn't want the news of him groveling on the feet of a celestial to spread, so he had no intention of sparing anyone on the battlefield, with the exception of his own forces. "I'll deal with both of you first," Arundel said as he faced the two kings, who were now only dozens of meters away from him. "I hope that both of you are prepared to die." Instead of answering him, the Ogre King and the Tigerkin King roared fearlessly as they brandished their weapons against him. While this was happening, Adira focused her attention on running away as fast as she could. She understood that it was impossible for King Gamara and King Atlas to hold Arundel back for long. "Is there really no other way?" Adira asked, while making sure that the boy sitting in front of her wouldn't slip away from her grasp. "No," 13 replied. "Also, if the worst comes to worse, feel free to leave my side, Lady Adira. I will manage somehow." "And why would I do that?" Adira snorted. "We're in this together, so—" Suddenly, Adira's sixth sense screamed inside her head, making her grab Zion and jump off her shadow horse. A second later, a red laser passed them, piercing through the shadow steed, splitting it in half. **T. Adira cursed in her heart as she used her body to cushion Zion's fall on the ground. The two rolled for several meters before the drow glanced behind them to see what was happening. King Gamara and King Atlas were still fighting against Arundel, but the latter even had enough free time to target them from a distance. However, before she and the younger boy could even stand, another red laser flew in their direction, giving only Adira enough time to push Zion away. A pained cry escaped the drow's lips as her legs were severed from her body. But instead of blood, shadowy particles rose up from the severed part, making 13's face turn grim. "Go!" Adira shouted as she summoned a whip that wrapped itself around Zion's waist. With one powerful lash, Adira sent Zion flying towards one of their allies, who was already running in their direction. "This is fun." Arundel laughed as he summoned 2 flaming swords to block the Ogre King's blow. "You're weak." Arundel then kicked the Ogre King away, sending the latter flying hundreds of meters in the air. The Tiger King used that opportunity to land a full-powered blow on the side of Arundel's body, but the Magian Prince casually stepped to the side, avoiding King Atlas' sneak attack. "Pathetic." Arundel sneered before kicking the Tiger King away like a soccer ball. He was more interested in torturing the boy than dealing with the 2 thrones, whom he believed couldn't harm him. If he was fighting against 5 opponents, Arundel would not openly show himself. However, he had already eliminated 3 of the kings and burned their bodies to ashes. In short, he no longer had anything to fear, which was the reason why he could take his time and do whatever he wanted. For him, the moment the 3 kings died, the battle had already been won. So, regardless of what his enemies could do, and no matter how many they were, there was only one ending waiting for them, and that was death. 13, who had been thrown away by Adira, was caught by Giga Chad. "Giga, run away in the opposite direction." 13 orders. "Arundel is only after me. Get away from me." The 7-year-old didn't even wait for the Chad skunk to reply to his words as he sprinted away with everything he had. He knew that Arundel was only toying with him, but there was nothing he could do about it. The only thing he could think of was to push his allies away from him, so they wouldn't be harmed like Blackie, Rocky, O1, O2, and Adira. Giga Chad was one of his closest companions, aside from Tiona and Christopher. If something happened to him, he knew that the feelings that he had been bottling up inside his chest would break his heart. At that moment, a fireball landed several meters away from him, and from it emerged the Magian Prince, who was looking at the 7-year-old with a sneer on his face. "What's wrong, boy?" Arundel asked. "Do you want me to hold your hand so you can run faster?" "Ha ha ha." 13 ignored the Magian Prince and continued to run away. He wanted Arundel to continue toying with him, so that he could reach the place where he needed to be. It didn't matter if he got hurt in the process. As long as he could take him to the center of the formation, he would have a chance to seal him. "Let me help you run faster, boy." Arundel laughed as he summoned a dozen flame spears that flew in 13's direction. Gritting his teeth, 13 jumped and rolled to the side, evading the spears that landed just a foot away from his body. However, 4 of those spears suddenly changed their trajectory. Arundel planned to pin the boy's arms and legs, making him feel despair as his body slowly burned away and turned to ashes. 13 calculated where those spears would land, but he didn't have enough time to do anything about it. But, just as they were about to pierce his body, something big blocked their path and sprayed droplets of hot blood on 13's face. "No!" 13 looked at Giga Chad, who had used his body to shield him from the flame spears. "Giga!" The Blaze Chad skunk didn't even utter a groan of pain, and simply looked in 13's eyes. The monster's eyes had a determined look, as if telling his master that everything was going to be fine. With the flame spears piercing his body, Giga retracted the claws on his paws and nudged his master's body. "Go!" Giga said to him using his language. "Go, master. Go!" Tears finally fell on 13's face as Giga pushed him away. This time, blood seeped at the corner of the young boy's lips because he bit his lip too hard in order to regain his composure. He knew what he needed to do. He knew what Giga wanted him to do. So he ran away. Ran away, even though his vision was blurred with tears. "Ha ha ha. Run, little boy, run." Arundel laughed as he casually walked in the direction where the boy was running. However, something grabbed his foot, preventing him from moving away. Giga Chad had grabbed hold of the Magian Prince's leg, refusing to let go. "Oh, so you're playing the hero now?" The sneer on the Magian Prince's lips widened as he summoned a flame spear to stab the back of the persistent monster who didn't know his place. But, despite the pain, Giga Chad's hold of Arundel never loosened, making the Magian Prince repeatedly stab his body, making sure to not hit the monster's core, prolonging its suffering. However, after a minute had passed, Arundel had grown bored and tried to shake Giga Chad away, but the latter wasn't budging. It was as if the Chad skunk had focused all of his strength into his arms, turning it into a vice grip. A hint of annoyance appeared on Arundel's face as he glanced in the direction where the boy was running. He had allowed the boy to run away for a minute because it wouldn't be fun if this little game of his ended immediately. But he was starting to get annoyed by Giga Chad's stubbornness. Filthy monster. Arundel spat at the Chad skunk's face before kicking him away. An explosion erupted when Arundel's foot collided with Giga Chad's body, nearly destroying half of the monster's body. The body of 13th's faithful friend and companion crashed on the ground, with his entire body blazing like a giant bonfire. Arundel didn't even give the loyal monster another glance as he ran after the boy, who was desperately making his way to the flag that was fluttering in the distance. High above the sky, Visego screeched angrily after seeing what happened to his good friend. Pocopocos didn't really care about other people and monsters, except for their kind. However, he had grown fond of his master and his circle of friends, who fearlessly faced off against the Magian prince, who was now after his master with a devilish smile on his face. Visego's eyes glinted as he soared high in the sky. He would like nothing more than to attack Arundel despite knowing that it would not even scratch him. The only reason why he persevered was due to the fact that this was the only way that he could help his master achieve his goal. He had an important role to play, and Visego would make sure that he fulfilled his role first before he descended from the sky in a blaze of glory, with the intention of avenging his companions, whom he had learned to love. "Playtime's over, boy," Arundel said as he approached the human child, who had shouted out the most shameful moment of the Magian prince's life. He didn't know how the human boy knew his secret, because this event had happened over 300 years ago. But he wasn't too worried. He intended to torture the boy to make him spill everything he knew before he burned his body to a crisp. Suddenly, 2 fireballs were hurled in Arundel's direction, which the Magian prince blocked with his arms. At first, he didn't feel anything, but a few seconds later, he felt a stinging pain on his arms, making him frown. When he saw that the places that were hit by the 2 fireballs had a small burn mark on them, the frown on Arundel's face deepened. Aside from Fornius weapons, he believed that nothing else could hurt him in the Valbera archipelago. But the evidence in front of him couldn't be mistaken, making him glare in the direction where the 2 fireballs came from. There 2 tigerkins stood a few meters away from each other. 13, who saw Percival and Anwer appear, felt a ray of hope because these 2 were 2 of his trump cards against Arundel. Whenever a great calamity arrived, a hero would always appear to save the day. Alongside him was also a villain, who would become his destined enemy. But 13 changed their fates a bit, making the 2 brothers, who were supposed to be at each other's throat, fight side by side against a greater threat that was now standing before them. Since both of them had the blessings of fate, their powers could wound Arundel, despite them being many times weaker than him. This was also why he had bestowed upon them the divine martial technique, Emperor's Might. The stronger their enemies were, the stronger their power would become. Although it was not enough to bridge the gap in ranks, it was still enough to make Arundel feel pain, no matter how small it was. These 2 cannot be allowed to live, Arundel thought as he glared at the 2 tigerkins in front of him. Originally, he wanted to make Anwer his subordinate because he had seen his potential. However, since the teenage tigerkin had the means to harm him, he would not take any chances and nip him in the bud before he could grow even stronger. But it was not only Anwer whom he had placed in his kill list. The younger tigerkin, whose arms and feet were covered in golden flames, was also someone who didn't need to exist. Suddenly, countless arrows flew in Arundel's direction and exploded at the point of impact. "Anwer Taiga, to me," 13 shouted. The 2 understood what 13 wanted to happen, so they didn't hesitate to follow behind him. Anwer even scooped up the 7-year-old and carried him like a sack of rice as he ran as fast as he could. Tigerkins were faster and stronger than ordinary humans, so they were able to gain some distance against Arundel, who was being bombarded by the arrows of the trolls, who were using the special arrows that Gerald had made for them. These arrows didn't have the ability to harm the Magian prince, but the dust that they produced at the moment of impact could obstruct his vision. This powdery dust was made from the ground wings of the illusion moth, which was a rank 4 monster that lived on the sacred island of the Valbera archipelago. They were the island's protectors, and their specialty was to create a glittering dust that would make their enemies enter an illusion, which would confuse their senses. The shamans had asked them for help, and the illusion moths shed their wings willingly and wrapped themselves up in a cocoon in order to regenerate them within a month. Arundel could see past smoke made by flames and smoke, but the powdery dust around him had completely dropped his visibility to 0. But these petty tricks were not enough to stop him. With a wave of his hand, the dust cloud dispersed, allowing him to see the direction the Tigerkins were running. The Magian Prince ran after them, but before he did so, he made sure to unleash thousands of fire bullets the size of baseballs at the annoying trolls who had gotten in his way. Being hindered by lowly monsters annoyed him very much, so he didn't hesitate to obliterate them all before running after the 2 Tigerkins and the human boy whom he wouldn't allow to live. T1 managed to dodge in time, but one of the fire bullets grazed the side of his face, creating a burn scar. 5 of his companions weren't as lucky, and their bodies were incinerated by the Magian Prince's merciless attacks. The other 4 managed to survive, but suffered serious injuries. All of them now lay on the ground, groaning in pain. Arundel, whose gaze was locked on the body of the escaping Tigerkins, summoned a fireball that was bigger than anything he had summoned before. He had now grown tired of this game of tag and wanted to end it once and for all. Genocide break. Arundel threw the giant fireball, which could instantly obliterate an entire city. Hammer for all seasons, final form. 13, who was being carried away by Anwir, raised his head after hearing the familiar voice that reverberated in his surroundings. "Pops!" "No!" 13 shouted. In front of him, Gerald, who was riding on top of a saber-toothed tiger, raised his hammer high up in the air. Golden flames rose up from his arms as his entire body was covered in red armor. Time seemed to come to a complete stop as 13 looked at his father, who was poised to strike. He couldn't see his face because the only thing that he could see was his father's back. His strong, dependable back that made him feel that he was about to lose another person that was very precious to him. Although Gerald wasn't his real father, and he just called him Pops, 13 had shared many happy memories with him. "Pops!" At his shout, time returned to normal, and Gerald's words, filled with courage and determination, reached his ears. "Fortress Breaker!" A powerful shock wave pushed 13, Percival, and Anwar hundreds of meters in the air before an explosion that wouldn't lose to the magma fiend's self-destruction ability erupted behind them. "Pull-ups!" 13 shouted at the top of his lungs despite the fact that he was being blown away by a force that created a giant crater that was hundreds of meters wide. Even after he crashed and rolled dozens of meters on the ground, the pain he felt was nothing compared to the pain that he felt in his breaking heart. 13's body was covered in blood and bruises as he forced himself to stand up. He no longer had the strength to run, but he no longer had any intention of running. Anwar and Percival, who were right beside him, both took fighting stances. Both of them understood that turning their back against such an enemy was no longer an option. Despite knowing that the chances of them winning against Arundel in a frontal confrontation was 0, they still stood their ground. Why? Because a 7-year-old boy was standing in front of them, who had every intention to fight till his last breath. "Brother Taiga, give me some time," 13 said as he wiped the blood from his forehead and started to write rune symbols on his arms. "Okay," Anwar replied. He didn't even bother to ask how long he should hold back the Magian Prince for, because delaying Arundel for more than a minute was already a monumental task. However, since his sworn brother had asked him to give him time, he would buy him as much time as he could, even if it was just for a few seconds. Percival walked past 13 as he prepared himself to fight to the death. He wasn't delusional enough to think that he would survive against Arundel for more than a few seconds, but since his brother was going to fight, he would not allow himself to cower behind him. Within the blazing inferno, a 4-meter-tall silhouette appeared. No longer planning to run away, Arundel asked in a teasing tone, "Good. It's time to put an end to this farce." 13, who was busy writing symbols on his left and right arms, didn't even bother to look at the Magian prince, who didn't even have a scratch on his body, despite walking through such a hellish landscape. "Brother, there is something I want to say before we fight that thing," Percival said. "I hate you. Tell me something I don't already know," Anwer replied with sarcasm. "Although I hate you, it won't change the fact that you've been a good brother for the past few years," Percival stated. "Although it annoys me that you will accompany me to the afterlife, at least my journey will not be lonely." "Yeah," Anwer smirked. "That doesn't sound so bad." The two Tigerkins then unleashed the full power of their emperor's might at the same time, creating a powerful gust of wind that was expanding outwards. Black and golden flames rose up from their bodies, making the two of them stand out amidst the darkness around them. Behind them, a 7-year-old summoned countless cores around him, as he also readied himself to fight. "Those who look down on my people," 13 said as the cores around him glowed faintly, merging with the runic symbols on his body. "Those who step on their dreams." The runic symbols on his arms started to shine in a golden light as they absorbed the powers of the cores around him. "Those who think that they can brush off my people with impunity will face the wrath of me." 13 roared, and, one by one, the steel posts that he planted around the battlefield radiated with power, creating a gigantic magical formation. With him, Anwer, Percival, and Arundel at its center. The flag, which he had planted in the center of the formation, fluttered a few meters behind him. He had reached the end of his goal, and now it was his turn to make Arundel understand that even the weak had their own ways of fighting. Perhaps sensing that something was about to happen, Arundel no longer hesitated and charged forward with his entire body covered in blazing flames. A single drop of blood fell on the ground beside 13's feet as the magic circle completed its formation. 10,000 shackles of annihilation, 13 said in a cold voice that reverberated across the entire battlefield. Suddenly, countless shackles of different colors bound Arundel's body, preventing him from moving. 13 knew that there was still a chance that the Magian prince would be able to escape the formation he had created, so he decided to chain Arundel using his blood as a medium to summon the 10,000 shackles of annihilation. This was part of the formation that he had created as insurance, just in case Arundel proved to be more powerful than he imagined. But now he no longer cared. He would not hesitate to burn his life force just to make sure that his hated enemy would not leave this place alive. "Visego," 13 shouted with all of his might. "Poka," high above the clouds. 2 shrieks answered his call. The bodies of the 2 Poka-Pokos shone brightly like beacons in the night. Both of them descended down from the heavens, creating a giant line, heading towards the ground. Miles away from their location, Christopher saw the signal from afar using his telescope. "Move the ballista to the right side," Christopher ordered. Brutus, Bruno, and Jubii heeded his order, and moved the ballista to point in the direction where the silvery light was pointing. This was the signal that 13 had told him, and once he saw this, he would deliver the one thing that could threaten the Magian prince's life. Pulling a lever, the runic symbols that 13 had placed on the grand ballista came to life. "Endbringer," Christopher shouted. Launching, the golden bolt, which was made from the gold of the Valbera archipelago, shot into the air like a railgun, traveling at the speed of sound. It left a trail of golden light, making all the wanderers and the warriors of all the races who had survived on the battlefield look at this marvelous sight. Arundel sensed something approaching him at great speeds, which made him feel that death was just a step away from him. Using all the strength in his body, he raised his right arm and roared in anger and desperation. "Disintegrate!" At that exact moment, Arundel's hand connected with the golden bolt, which 13 had named Endbringer. But before 13's ultimate attack could even damage the Magian prince's body, the golden bolt disintegrated, making Anwer's and Percival's eyes widen in shock. They didn't expect that Arundel had his own trump card, which could instantly turn anything he touched into nothingness, regardless of its form. Although the 2 Tigerkins and those who were watching the battle were surprised, there was one person who was not surprised by this outcome. A sneer appeared on 13th's bloody face as he looked at the Magian prince, who had done exactly what he wanted him to do. While the golden bowl had indeed been turned to nothingness, there was one thing that Arundel had failed to disintegrate, and that was none other than the medallion that was now in the Magian prince's hand. 13 had placed Arthas' medallion inside the Endbringer when it was being made. Because of this, the Magian prince didn't detect its presence, making him unable to know what was going to happen next. The 7-year-old was only allowed to use one high-level runic symbol by Laplace Demon and the One. So, he placed this symbol on the one thing that would make the Magian prince regret that he was ever born. And that was none other than the beacon of light, whose blinding radiance shot towards the heavens. The medallion was an artifact given to Arthas' ancestor by a fiend. This fiend was not the sea serpent, Fornius, but another fiend whose greed for gold and wealth surpassed the greed of all the fiends and celestials combined. The dark clouds that hovered above the center of the formation that covered the battlefield slowly parted, and from it, a giant golden head that resembled the face of the smiling Buddha appeared. The moment Arundel saw this face, his entire body shuddered in fright, paralyzing him completely. A few seconds later, the smiling golden Buddha slowly opened his eyes. The moment his gaze landed on Arundel's body, its peaceful expression suddenly changed that to malevolent anger, making it look like a hideous demon who would destroy everything in existence. No one in the Valbera archipelago had seen such a horrifying scene, but there was one person on the battlefield whose gaze burned brightly with the light of vengeance. With a loud roar, giant golden fist descended from the sky, smashing the arrogant Magian prince, who thought that he was invincible mere moments ago. At the same time, across the Valbera archipelago, all the wanderers who were still alive and had been hiding in the Houdini Desert, the Barbarian Kingdom, and the Sumatran Kingdom suddenly received a notification. Congratulations! Your mission, lighting the beacon of hope, is completed. Rewards will be awarded to you, depending on your contribution. Would you like to return to Pangea? Yes/no. All the wanderers rejoiced and hugged each other after seeing such a scene. Right in front of them, they saw a 10-minute countdown, giving them some time to decide if they wished to leave this hellish world once and for all. Some of the wanderers didn't hesitate, and they turned into beams of light that shot towards the heavens like shooting stars. Rihanna's hunting party hugged each other, as they, too, chose to return to Pangea so that they could see their families once again. But there were some who decided to stay and watch everything until the very last second. Christopher, Rihanna, Colbert, Harry, Rufus, Aaron, and Jean planned to stay behind for as long as they could. Even if they pressed the no option, they would still be forced to teleport away from the battlefield after the countdown ended because they had finally accomplished their mission. Another golden fist descended from the sky and smashed against Arundel, pinning him to the ground. 13 raised his head to look at the angry fiend, whom he had summoned to the Valbera archipelago, using his high-level runic symbol. He was none other than the fiend of greed, wealth, and money, Mammon, who was very angry because Arundel had destroyed the gold that rightfully belonged to him. Amidst the Magian prince's painful screams and pleas for forgiveness, a pained sob silently echoed in the surroundings. 13, who had lost many important companions in this battle, cried bitterly as one of the fiends, Mammon, descended fully onto the battlefield to make sure that whoever owed him would pay the price for their insolence. How did this happen? Arundel, who had suffered serious injuries after getting punched twice by Mammon, stared in horror as the fiend descended from the sky. He was certain that the fiend of wealth and greed couldn't care less even if he were to conquer the Valbera archipelago. For the most part, Mammon only cared about wealth and treasures, so his invasion was not enough for him to make an appearance. Arundel had been very cautious from the start, and he even asked the Magian princess, Camrasipa, a favor to do a divination for him. Camrasipa had assured him that Fornius wouldn't make an appearance, which was the only thing that worried Arundel in his grand design for the Valbera archipelago. The Magian princess was spot on. and the sea monster was indeed nowhere in sight. However, someone else had come, which made the one who had the title of the Destroyer feel as if the one who was going to be destroyed was him. It has been a while since someone dared to take what is mine. Mammon growled as he stepped on the body of the Magian prince, crushing Arundel's right leg. Do you have a death wish? And no, Your Excellency, Arundel replied. I have no intention of taking what is yours. But you did. Mammon sneered. All the gold in the Valbera archipelago has been erased by you. Tell me, how do you plan to settle your debts? Arundel's army shuddered as Mammon's gaze swept through them all. Perhaps, not able to take the fear and pressure that was coming from the fiend, one of the held chargers decided to run away. This created a spark, prompting the rest of the Magian prince's army to run toward the sea, where the sea monsters were waiting for their return. Mammon looked at these fleeing monsters in contempt. Since when did he allow those who owed him to escape and not pay their dues? A second later, a beam of light erupted from the golden giant's eyes and covered all the jinns and magians under Arundel's command. When the light receded, the formidable army, which had come to invade the Valbera archipelago, had been turned into gold statues. This made the armies of the barbarians, orcs, tigerkins, ogres, and trolls stay where they were. They didn't dare make any move in fear that the next ones who would be turned into golden statues would be them. Why, Your Excellency, please, let me explain. Arundel pleaded. I only defended myself. So you're saying that your life is worth more than my gold? Mammon said in disdain. Since when was that the case? Even dozens of you will not amount to a single gold coin that belongs to me. Mammon crushed Arundel's left leg, crippling the Magian prince. If Arundel really wanted to, he could turn his destroyed legs into flames, allowing him to stand once more. But he didn't dare to do it. He could feel that his life was only a moment away from being extinguished, so he shamelessly begged for mercy and pleaded to be spared. Seeing that there was no trace of mercy on the fiend's expression, Arundel decided to shift the blame to someone else. Your Excellency, I believe that boy is responsible for everything, Arundel said as he pointed at 13, who was crying dozens of meters away from him. The chains that bound Arundel earlier had shattered the moment Mammon punched the Magian prince. However, the formation that 13 created was still active, trapping the seriously injured Magian prince in place. And what of it? Mammon asked in contempt. So what if he is responsible for everything? A mere boy, not even a man, faced you in battle and used everything in his arsenal to win. And you, despite your advantage, still lost. You're a disgrace. Arundel clenched his fists tightly because he couldn't refute Mammon's words. If the members of the Order of the Apocalypse were to know that he was defeated by a child, who was not even of age, he would become the laughingstock of their organization. But he would rather be a laughingstock than be dead. Mammon snorted before giving the 7-year-old a sidelong glance. But you're right, Mammon stated. This boy used an underhanded means to forcefully summon me to this place. This is something that I do not find pleasing. The beacon of light was only supposed to make Mammon look in the direction of the Valbera archipelago to see what was happening. If he felt like it, then he would be able to instantly teleport to its location using the beacon that he had given Arthas' ancestor. But 13 did him dirty. Thanks to the high-level rune added to the golden amulet, its effects were amplified, forcing Mammon to appear in the Valbera archipelago, whether he liked it or not. Sensing that this was his only opportunity to survive, Arundel grabbed hold of the opportunity to gain Mammon's favor. Please, allow me to deal with him for you, Your Excellency. Arundel begged. I will serve you and become your loyal servant. So please, spare me. Oh, Mammon smiled evilly. Very well, I will give you a chance. Kill him. Yes. Arundel turned his broken legs into flames, allowing him to stand up again. He then glared hatefully at the boy who was standing behind Anwer and Percival. The two Tigerkins had both taken a fighting stance, ready to fight. 13, who had heard everything, wiped the tears in his eyes and looked at the Magian prince, who had every intention of killing him. It's too late, 13 replied softly. This game of chess is already over. You've lost, Arundel. The Magian prince ignored the boy's words and took a step forward in order to punch him to oblivion. But just as he was about to do the deed, a bolt made from reinforced steel pierced his chest, making him stagger. Before Arundel could even realize what was happening, a second bolt descended upon his body, this time piercing his waist. If it had been earlier, Arundel would have easily dealt with the injuries in his body. But after getting seriously injured by Mammon's punches, which was instilled with fiendish aura, he had lost a good chunk of his strength, making his rank regress to that of a rank 7 sovereign. This made him unable to react to the 2 reinforced bolts filled with 13th's rune magic, whose only purpose was to hit the Magian prince that was still at the center of the magic formation. Right now, Arundel was no longer the invincible Magian prince. Even a reinforced bolt traveling at the speed of sound would be more than enough to pierce his body. "Do not mess with me," Arundel roared in anger as he covered his body in flames. He couldn't believe that he was suffering so much because of a human child, whom he had only met for the first time. As his gaze landed on the boy, he saw 13 raise his right hand to give him the middle finger. "Checkmate." 13th's words reached the Magian prince's ears. Not long after, 2 more bolts descended from the heavens and hit his Magian core, making Arundel, who gained the title of the Destroyer, howl in pain and desperation. "If I'm going to die, I'll take you with me." Arundel's eyes glowed with power as he prepared to self-destruct. However, at that exact moment, the devil-horned honey badger, Cranky, emerged from the ground behind him and slashed Arundel's neck, severing it from his body. After absorbing the fire dragon's core, the honey badger's rank jumped from a rank 7 sovereign to a rank 8 sovereign. This made Cranky much stronger than the seriously injured Arundel, allowing his razor-sharp claws to slice the Magian prince's body, ending his life before he could even self-destruct. The honey badger felt so accomplished for killing a very strong enemy that it screeched loudly to assert its dominance. Right now, it was the strongest creature in the Valbera archipelago, making it a guardian deity of sorts. Cranky happily picked up Arundel's head from the ground with the intention to eat it. However, just as he was about to take a bite, someone tapped his shoulder, making the honey badger hiss in anger. But when he saw that the one that tapped him was Mammon, Cranky started purring like a cat, making the corner of Anwar's and Percival's lips twitch. Mammon then reverted to his peaceful and smiling face before extending his hand to the honey badger, gesturing to it to give him Arundel's head. Cranky looked at the fiend's hand before shifting his gaze to Arundel's head. A look of unwillingness could be seen on the honey badger's face, but in the end, he did the right thing and surrendered the Magian prince's head to Mammon. The moment Cranky placed Arundel's severed head on Mammon's palm, it immediately turned to gold, making the honey badger jump back in fear. Mammon then gazed in the direction where the reinforced bolts came from, but the only thing he saw were a few shooting stars that shot up towards the sky. The fiend then shifted its attention to the 7-year-old, who was being protected by the 2 tigerkins. "Your name?" Mammon asked. "Zion Leventus," 13 replied. Mammon then crouched down and smiled at the 7-year-old who had used him to fight his enemy. Without any warning, the fiend flicked his finger on the 7-year-old boy, sending the latter flying thousands of meters in the air. A trail of blood escaped the boy's lips as he helplessly fell toward the ground. "If you manage to survive, I'll consider this incident even," Mammon growled. "No one can use me to fight their battles for them." The fiend attacked 13 with the intention to kill. But instead of the boy turning into meat paste, the blow only sent the boy flying, making him suffer serious injuries. Due to how sudden it was, Anwar and Percival weren't able to react in time. Mammon didn't even bother to look at the outcome because he believed that the boy would die the moment he crashed on the ground. But even if he managed to survive, that was fine as well. Mammon disappeared alongside the army of the Magian prince, which had been transformed into gold. He then returned to the main continent, leaving the Valbera archipelago and the boy who was falling from the sky to their fate. Mammon's finger flick was more than enough to kill an ordinary human 1,000 times over. The only reason why 13 didn't die instantly was due to the reward he gained after completing his 4th trial of killing the diabolical hyena. Fourth trial completed. Defeat the rank 6 Overlord, Diabolical Hyena. Reward. You will gain a one-time ability that will prevent you from dying from any attack that can instantly kill you. But even if 13 didn't die from Mammon's finger flick, the damage he received from its impact still resulted in serious injuries. Not only that, but he was traveling the air at great speeds, so the moment he landed on the ground, he would definitely meet his end. The 7-year-old was already a spent candle, so he no longer had the strength to do anything. But just as he was about to crash on the ground, his body suddenly stopped mid-air and the space around him distorted. A moment later, he found himself staring at the face of the Laplace demon, who was looking at him with an amused expression on his face. "Sleep," Laplace demon said. "It would be funny if the one who made the highest contribution in this war was to die in that manner." 13 wanted to ask the Laplace demon if his father had survived, but he was suddenly assaulted by a drowsiness that he couldn't fight, making his eyelids very heavy. Soon, the boy finally fell into a deep sleep. The Laplace demon poured an elixir over his body, helping him recover from his injuries. 13 didn't know how long he slept, but he had a dream. In that dream, Giga Chad, Blackie, Rocky, and his monster slaves were having a picnic together, eating and laughing with smiles on their faces. The boy was also with them. Seated beside him was none other than his previous host, Tiona, who was feeding him with a sandwich. "Eat up, 13, Tiona said. "You need to recover soon, because there are many people who are waiting for you to return to them." "Okay." 13 obeyed and allowed Tiona to hand-feed him the sandwiches that she had prepared for him. After he finished eating his second sandwich, 13 suddenly felt like something was wrong. The laughing and the merry-making around him disappeared, making him glance at the empty tables around him. Giga Chad, Blackie, Rocky, and the other monster slaves was nowhere to be found. Only he and Tiona remained, making him suddenly feel anxious in his heart. Tiona looked at the boy sadly before hugging him. "The bond you have made with them is real," Tiona said softly. "All the happiness, the sadness, the pain, all of them are real. This is what it means to be human, 13. You will always experience new meetings. You will always experience goodbyes. Live your life to the fullest. Live your life without any regrets." 13 hugged Tiona back and wept silently. "Tiona, it hurts being human," 13 replied. "In the past, I didn't have to deal with these emotions. But now, I feel them every day." "Is this what you felt back then?" "Yes," Tiona answered. "Unfortunately, I didn't live long enough to know what true happiness means. So, 13, in this lifetime, let's do our best to find it. Although the journey will have its ups and downs and plenty of bumps along the way, all I can say is that I'll be with you to help you face whatever comes your way. Let's go back, 13. Back to where everyone is waiting for us. You still have promises to keep and miles to go before you sleep." 13 slowly opened his eyes and once again found himself in the celestial realm, where the Laplace demon and the One was waiting for him to wake up. "Before anything else, let me congratulate you for a job well done," Laplace demon said. "Out of the 500 wanderers who have appeared in the Valbera archipelago, 398 of them survived and completed their mission. The number of casualties would have been higher if the beacon of light wasn't lit. So allow me to thank you once again for your contribution this time around." 13 was surprised to know that there were so many wanderers that had been sent to the Valbera archipelago. But before the Laplace demon could even say anything else, 13 asked him the question that had been on his mind ever since he appeared in the celestial realm. "Did Pop survive?" 13 asked. The Laplace demon, who seemed to be waiting for this question, snapped his fingers. As if waiting for that moment, a projection appeared in front of 13. There, Gerald, riding on top of saber-toothed tiger, charged at the giant fireball that Arundel had aimed at 13. The 7-year-old watched as his father covered his body with a red, full-plate armor that seemed to be made from red scales. Suddenly, a thought appeared on 13's head, which made him watch the projection seriously. He saw how Gerald used his hammer to clash against the fireball, detonating it on impact. A powerful explosion erupted, which blew him away. When the light receded, 13 saw his father lying on the ground, with flames blazing all around him. However, he could faintly see his chest rising up and down, making him understand that his father had survived that fateful encounter. Laplace Demon once again snapped his finger, and the scene in the projection changed. There, he saw Gerald lying on what seemed to be a hospital bed with a cast on his right arm. Remy was sleeping peacefully beside him, which made 13 breathe a sigh of relief. "As you can see, your father is safe," Laplace Demon said. When he killed the fire dragon, he gained the fire dragon armor, which gave him an incredibly high resistance to heat and flames. That armor is also of the mythical rank, so it saved his life. Since the limiters for certain equipment were removed during the war, he was able to use the armor without problems. Don't worry, he would be allowed to use the armor anytime he wanted as one of the rewards for the contributions he has made in the battlefield. "How about Adira?" 13 inquired. "She's alive as well." The Laplace Demon once again showed the drow in the projection. Her legs were cut off by Arundel's laser attack, but this wasn't a problem for her. Adira's power revolved around darkness and shadow, so she just patched herself back up as if nothing had happened. Of course, she was still injured, but a week of rest was enough for her to fully recover. Seeing that the drow was safe and sound, the boy asked the other pressing question that was in his head. "How about Giga, Blackie, Rocky, and my other monster slaves?" 13 asked. "T1 up to T5 survived," Laplace Demon replied. "As for the rest," the Laplace Demon shook his head, informing 13 that they had perished in battle. The 7-year-old fell quiet for nearly 2 minutes before raising his head to hold the Laplace Demon's gaze. "Bring them back," 13 stated. "That is the wish that I want from completing my 6th trial." The 7-year-old glanced at his status page and read the information that was written there. 6th trial completed. Light the beacon of hope. Reward. You will be given the option to ask for whatever reward you want. However, this reward doesn't extend to the restrictions that are placed on your body. Even if you wish for them to be removed, it will not happen. So, think of the next best thing as your reward for completing this monumental task. P.S. As long as the reward you wish for is within reasonable bounds, it will be granted without fail. The reward should be within reasonable bounds, the Laplace Demon said. "This is within reasonable bounds," 13 replied. "If it's not enough, then use the other rewards that I was supposed to get after clearing this trial. Like you said, I have the highest contribution in this mission. I will not let you scam me like my father, who didn't grant my wishes after completing all my missions for thousands of years." The Laplace Demon couldn't help but scratch his head before looking at the blazing sun in the sky. He was unable to refute 13's words because the boy was the MVP and was meant to receive a lot of rewards after completing a mission that not even thrones and monarchs could easily accomplish. Fine. The one, who was the supreme god of Solterra, agreed to 13's demand. "But in doing so, you will relinquish all the rewards that could have been awarded to you for lighting the beacon of hope. Are you sure that this is what you want?" A faint smile appeared on 13's face as he nodded his head firmly. "This is what I want," 13 answered. "Very well. I will agree to this transaction," the one declared. Suddenly, 13 heard several notifications inside his mind, which made him look at his statue page. Name: Zion Levinas. Age: 7 years old. Race: human. Skills: none. Items: none. Avatars: none. Permanent debuff. Rank ban. Skill ban. Item ban. Avatar ban. Unique abilities: Universal Language Proficiency, Destiny Bond, Rune Magic, Intermediate. Beast Companions: Tiona, Giga Chad, Blackie, Rocky. A sigh of relief escaped 13's lips as he saw the changes in his statue page. Although he wouldn't receive any rewards after completing the mission of lighting the beacon of hope, he didn't have any regrets. There were things that were priceless in this world that no amount of treasures could ever hope to buy. In front of him, 3 projections appeared. Rocky's body, which had been cut in half, sunk to the deepest part of the land. However, these 2 parts merged together, making the magma Balboa once again open his eyes. Blackie, who had been blown away alongside 13 when Arundel's fireball descended near them, didn't die right away. However, he was killed when the monsters of Arundel's army advanced forward with his core eaten away. But a new core suddenly appeared inside his chest, healing all the injuries that his body had received. A few seconds later, Blackie opened his eyes as well. The last projection was Giga Chad. After doing his best to prevent Arundel from coming after 13, the Magian Prince had kicked him away, destroying his body and setting him ablaze until only his core was left. Giga Chad's ashes swirled around his core and slowly formed his body once more. Little did 13 know that Laplace Demon and the One had already anticipated that he would make this kind of wish. So they made sure that the souls of his people would remain in their bodies and cores even after they died. This would allow them to easily build or reconstruct a new body for them, allowing them to revive as if they had just taken a nice long nap. O1, O2, T6 up to T10 had also been revived as per 13's wishes. Nice long nap. O1, O2, T6 up to T10 had also been revived as per 13's. These monsters, whom he didn't think much of in the past, had given their all to protect him. They didn't even hesitate to sacrifice their lives to make it happen. So how could he possibly turn his back on them? Seeing that his subordinates had once again been revived, 13 closed his eyes and shed a tear. He had trust issues, especially when it came to promises of wish being granted. Fortunately, Laplace Demon and the One didn't deny him of his wish, unlike what his own father had done to him back then. 13, there is another surprise waiting for you when you step out of this place, Laplace Demon said with a smirk on his face. But I won't tell you anything about it. The 7-year-old only shrugged because he would find whatever surprises were waiting for him very soon. After doing a few stretches, 13 felt that his body had fully recovered from his injuries. Send me back. 13 stared at the Laplace Demon, who was looking at him with a mischievous smile on his face. Of course, Laplace Demon said as he clapped his hands together. The world around 13 distorted as Laplace Demon sent him back to Solterra. When he finally disappeared from the celestial realm, a chuckle escaped Laplace Demon's lips because the boy didn't know what was waiting for him in his return. When the world around him finally stabilized, 13 found himself standing in a dark room. But it didn't take long for him to realize that he wasn't alone. There, sitting around a round table and looking at him with curiosity, were 12 beings. The 7-year-old released a cold breath when he recognized one of the beings that was staring in his direction. It was none other than the Magian Princess, Camerasipa, who was looking back at him with a genuine look of amusement on her beautiful face. The demi-human bat, Kumasats, frowned the moment the human boy materialized in their conference room. Only members of the Order of the Apocalypse could appear in this plane of existence, which made the people sitting around the table understand what just happened. You're the one who defeated Arundel? Kumasats asked in disbelief. You? A human child defeated a Magian prince. It was not only Kumasats who had a surprised look. After all, no matter how much they extended their senses to check the boy's rank, the only result that they got was that he was just an ordinary human. And that was the reason why he looked extraordinary in their eyes. While everyone was reeling from the shock, an old demon with a long white beard chuckled. Welcome to the Order of the Apocalypse, boy, the old demon said. Care to share your name? 13 planned to answer the question with, I am Zion Leventus, like he always did, but something inside of him prevented that from happening. Instead, he walked forward and headed to the only vacant seat beside the round table, and sat properly. The demi-human bat, who was seated beside him, smirked at 13 and moved his head closer until it was only a foot away from the boy's face. Old Bells is asking you a question, boy, Kumasat said. What is your name? 13. 13 replied with a calm expression on his face. Just call me 13. Once again, we welcome you to the Order of the Apocalypse, 13, the old man, who went by the name Beelzebub, said with a smile. At least, until someone else takes your place. The other members of the Order chuckled, with the exception of Camerasipa. In their eyes, they would have a new member again soon because anyone who managed to defeat or kill 13 would become their newest member. 13 didn't reply and simply stared at the old demon prince, who was many times stronger than Arundel. Well, don't be like that, old bells. Kamisats smirked. The newbie needs to at least know the basics before he dies, don't you think? Since you are in a good mood, why don't you tell this newbie about the rules of our order? Beelzebub smiled. I was just about to get to that, old bells, Kamisats said. First things first, I'll introduce myself. I am Kamisats the Untamed. I hold the 12th seat of the Order of the Apocalypse. Nice to meet you, newbie. Likewise. 13 nodded, making the other Magian princes and princesses look at him in amusement. Kamisats chuckled because, just like everyone else, he was just going with the flow. Truth be told, he wanted nothing more than to inform one of his acquaintances to hunt down 13, so that they would gain the seat of authority that the boy had gained after he defeated Arundel. Of course, the other members of the Order were thinking of the same thing. If someone in their circle of friends was able to kill 13, then they would have more power in the decision-making of their organization. So, let me tell you about the rules Kamisats stated. The first rule is that none of us are allowed to kill or get in the way of each other. However, if I happen to know a friend that is not part of the Order, I can inform them about you. If they happen to kill you, then they will owe me a favor once they become a member. So do your best to survive, kid. You are about to have a very exciting life. Yay, 13 replied, which made Kamisats laugh out loud. I like you, kid. Kamisats pounded the table with his hands as he laughed. It's a shame that you're too weak to protect your position. 13 didn't deny or confirm the Deathbat's words, and simply listened to whatever he was going to say next. The second rule is that once a year, during the spring equinox, you must make an achievement worthy of your position as a member of the Apocalypse, Kamisats stated. If not, then you will lose your seat of power. The achievement will depend on your current rank. For beings like us, we are only qualified to keep our seat if we are able to take over a territory or accomplish something that is truly praiseworthy. Kamisats rubbed his chin as he gazed at the boy seated beside him. If you want to have an example of what kind of accomplishments you need to do to retain your position, lightly tap the table and say, Mission selection, Kamisats explained. 13 nodded and did as Kamisats stated. Mission selection, 13 said after tapping the table with his hand. A list of missions then appeared in front of the boy, allowing him to choose a quest that would allow him to retain his position in the Order of the Apocalypse. Order mission. Defeat a rank 4 sovereign. You can challenge this mission with a group of 4. The only requirement is that the creatures that will accompany you must be 2 ranks below that of a rank 4 sovereign. No, since you have just been accepted in the Order, you will be given a grace period of 5 years. Within those 5 years, you may or may not undertake this mission. This mission can be cleared multiple times, and your achievements will stack up with every rank 4 sovereign that you defeated. Clearing one mission will allow you to retain your position for a year longer. Kamisats, who was laughing a while later, could no longer laugh after seeing the mission that was available for 13. What is this? Kamisats asked. Is this a joke? Just kill a rank 4 sovereign and he gets to keep his seat of power? Are you kidding me? The other members of the Order also didn't find this development funny. In order for them to keep their position, they had to go out of their way to wage war on the other Magian princes and princesses to gain their territory and loyalty. However, there was one person who giggled after seeing this development. Well, an ordinary human defeating a rank 4 sovereign is an extraordinary feat, no? Camersepa commented, I mean, if all of you are as powerless as this boy, do you think you could do such a thing? I definitely can. Kamisats stated, it's just a rank 4 sovereign. I can't believe this. This kid needs to get kicked out of the group ASAP. It's unfair. The Deathbat glared at the 7-year-old, who was calmly looking at the other missions that would allow him to retain his position. He believed that an organization that had these powerful beings in it wasn't that simple. If there were rules in place, it also meant that there would be some kind of benefit in being part of the hidden organization. Are there any other rules that I need to know? 13 asked. Seeing that Kamisats was no longer in the mood to explain anything, Camersepa decided to take over. The third rule states that if ever one of the members of the Order were to ask a favor from any one of its members, they would have the right to reject it. Simply put, just because we are in the same organization, that doesn't mean that we are required to cooperate with each other. Cooperation is possible if both sides agree to a condition. This condition cannot be broken, and anyone who tries loses their right to remain in the order, and their seat of power will then be transferred to the person that they had agreed to cooperate with. The one who gains the extra seat of power will then have the option to bestow it to anyone they desire. This is their right, and is acknowledged by the founders of the apocalypse. Camarasipa paused before looking at the boy with a mischievous smile on her face. Of course, even with a condition or contract in place, there can still be loopholes, so you have to be wary of falling into a trap. 13 nodded and smiled internally. When it came to loopholes, he believed that no one in the order would have more experience than him. Is there anything else? 13 inquired. No, Camarasipa replied. Those are the only rules of the order. 13 then rested his chin on the back of his intertwined hands as he gazed at the beautiful Magian princess. Then, what about the benefits? 13 asked. Surely, there should be some benefits in being part of this organization, right? Of course, Camarasipa nodded. And believe me, the benefits here are one of the reasons why everyone is now aiming to have you killed by their acquaintances, so that the rewards for being part of this organization will fall in their hands. 13 couldn't help but narrow his eyes because this was something that he needed desperately. As someone who was unable to gain any kind of items or reward from Solterra, anything that would give him great benefits was something that he had no intention of letting of, no matter what. The benefits will be explained to you by the will of Metatron, Camarasipa explained. But, to give you an idea, I will tell you what you need to know. Once a year, before or during the night of the solstice, we are allowed to enter the gate of the apocalypse. Within it are treasures that are only available to the members of the order. Every year, we are allowed to take one item, and only one item from the treasury. Also, we have what you call the apocalypse points. Remember the missions that will allow you to remain as a member of the order? Completing that mission will allow you to gain 1 point. The more points you accumulate, the more layers of the treasury will be open to you. However, there are special missions that can give you anywhere from 10 points up to 100 apocalypse points. If you want to know what these missions are, just hold the key in your hands and close your eyes. It will tell you the mission that will allow you to gain more points than usual. 13 nodded in understanding. Right now, he didn't plan on checking what kind of missions would give him more apocalypse points. He could already tell that the mission would be more dangerous than just hunting a rank 4 sovereign. Now, summon your token. Camarasipa smiled. That is the key that will allow you to visit this place anytime you want to. It is also the key that will take you to the gate of the apocalypse to get your reward for becoming one of our members. 13 opened the palm of his hand and looked at it with narrowed eyes. A second later, a black token with a sunburst design appeared, making him arch an eyebrow. The moment the token appeared on his hand, a flood of information entered his brain, telling him of the rules of the orders, as well as the ways to go to the treasury of the apocalypse. Right in front of everyone, 13 disappeared without a trace, making the members of the apocalypse glance at each other with smiles on their faces. One by one, they disappeared from the conference room to return to their own territories. They were unable to wait for even a moment to inform their acquaintances that Arundel had been defeated by a human boy that hadn't even stepped into the rookie rank. Among the history of the Order of the Apocalypse, this was the first time that such a weak seat of power had appeared. Because of this, they were confident that their acquaintances would be able to kill 13 easily, allowing them to gain the token of the apocalypse that had merged with his body. While the members of the Order were spreading the news of Arundel's defeat, 13 found himself looking at a giant black gate with the same sunburst design that was on his token. At the center of the gate was a hole, which resembled the token in his hand. As if understanding what he wanted to happen, the token flew towards the hole and locked itself in place before turning clockwise. The sound of a lock opening reverberated in the surroundings, and the gate of the apocalypse slowly opened. 13 couldn't see anything past the door except for darkness. But, since there was nowhere else to go, he decided to enter it without a second thought. The moment he stepped inside the gate, he found himself standing on what seemed to be a museum of sorts. The only difference was that there was no roof above him, and only dark clouds could be seen in the sky. Various items of different shapes and sizes were displayed in glass cases, waiting for someone to pick them up. But just as 13 was about to explore the place, a voice filled with power spread in the surroundings. Congratulations, 13, for becoming the 13th member of the Apocalypse. A being with 8 angelic wings descended from the sky and appeared before the 7-year-old with a smile on his face. I am the will of Metatron, and I am also the guardian of the gate of Apocalypse, Metatron said. Since this is your first time coming here, allow me to explain to you the rules of this place. Metatron waved his hand, and 30 items hovered in front of 13, making the boy narrow his eyes. But before I start my explanation, I will give you your rewards first, Metatron stated. You are the one that defeated Arundel, so you are allowed to take your spoils of war from him. Choose 3 items from his possessions as your spoils of war. But before you choose, I will do you a favor and choose one of them for you. A blazing purple Magian core separated itself from the 30 items that 13 was supposed to choose from. Do you know? The cores that the Wanderers absorb in order to get to the next rank has a special meaning to them, Metatron asked with a smile. Before you Wanderers rank up, the One will select the highest ranking core that you have absorbed before your breakthrough. This would allow you to gain anywhere from 1% to 20% of that monster's strength. This is also the reason why not all rookies are equal. Depending on the quality of the core that you absorb, the power you gain will also rise drastically. However, there is just one problem. The highest core that a Wanderer who had just started his first wandering can absorb is a rank 5 monster. Anything higher than that would cause their body to explode. The will of Metatron smirked as she snapped his fingers, making a chart appear in front of 13. Core points. Rank 1 is equal to 1 point. Rank 2 is equal to 5 points. Rank 3 is equal to 10 points. Rank 4 is equal to 100 points. Rank 5 is equal to 500 points. Rank 6 is equal to 3,000 points. Rank 7 is equal to 10,000 points. Rank 8 is equal to 100,000 points. Rank 9 is equal to 500,000 points. Prince equals 1,000,000 points. You already know that each core gives different points to Wanderers, Metatron explained. In order to reach the rookie rank, you need 200 rank 1 cores or 2 rank 4 cores. However, you can simply absorb a rank 5 core and meet the requirements needed for a breakthrough. Doing so is also the most recommended approach. Depending on that monster's specialty, a Wanderer could become stronger, faster, smarter, flexible, and luckier, depending on the rank 5 monster core that he absorbed. Anything above rank 5 will make the Wanderer die of self-implosion, so they can't be too greedy. Of course, 13 already knew this information, which was why he had given Christopher and Colbert the rank 5 cores of alpha hyenas that served as the diabolical hyenas' bodyguards. Both of them were his subordinates, so he made sure to give them the best. As for Rihanna, he took pity on her and also gave her a rank 5 core. But this core came from the pile that was located in the diabolical hyena's den. He didn't know what kind of monster it was from, but he was certain that it was at least of the alpha rank. Although the young lady wasn't really his subordinate, she had played an important role and acted as a support during his stay in the barbarian lands. Because of this, he decided to be generous and allowed her to benefit from the spoils he got from defeating the hyena overlord. Since the maximum core that someone who is about to become a rookie is a rank 5 monster, why did you choose Arundel's core? 13 asked calmly. Do you want me to die perhaps? Of course not. Metatron chuckled. In fact, I genuinely wish to help you, 13. After all, you have so many restrictions placed on your body. I find you truly pitiful, you know? Hearing those words, a frown appeared on the 7-year-old's face. He didn't know how the Metatron knew about the restrictions placed in his body. I may only be a residual will of my true self, but remember this, 13. In this world, I stand above the celestials and fiends, Metatron said. You can even say that I am the being that is closest to becoming God. Because of this, I am able to see the restrictions on your body just by looking at you. Since you will stay as a rookie for life, wouldn't it be a shame if you didn't get Arundel's core and gain a fraction of his power? Metatron was like a devil tempting 13 to sell his soul to him in exchange for something good. But the boy knew that the being in front of him was worse than a devil. However, he also knew how devils operated because one of his hosts was an archdevil in the past. "Don't worry, I will not do anything bad to you," Metatron stated. "In fact, I very much support you. After all, you're just like me, don't you think? Both of us hate fate. So, why don't I help you absorb this Magian core that belonged to a prince? Also, I will give you one more bonus. After you successfully absorb this core, I will allow you to choose one skill that belongs to Arundel and make it your power." "That won't happen." 13 shook his head. "I am unable to learn any skills." "Correction, 13. Metatron wagged his finger in front of the boy, shaking it left and right. "You're unable to learn skills the normal way. But with my help, you will be able to learn one of Arundel's powers. Didn't I tell you? I am the closest to becoming a god in this world. If the one can bestow skills upon you, I can easily do the same. The fun part is that your restrictions can't do anything about it. Do you want me to tell you why?" 13 nodded. "It's because whoever placed those restrictions on you broke the rules of the world," Metatron explained. "Because of this, the power restricting you is stretched very thin. If that restriction were to try rejecting a skill given to you by someone extremely powerful, what do you think would happen?" "The restrictions would collapse," 13 answered in a heartbeat. Metatron nodded. "That's right. So, the moment your restrictions refuse this skill, it will reach its limit and shatter into countless pieces. This will allow you to break free from the hold of God who thought that they could shackle those who wish to fight against fate." 13's expression became serious because, according to his calculations, Metatron was right. But since he believed that his father would prioritize his restrictions over preventing him from getting a skill, he believed that Metatron's plan on giving him one would succeed. Of course, that would be based on the theory that he would not implode after absorbing the core of the Magian Prince, which was worth 1,000,000 points. 1,000,000 points was enough for 13's grandfather, Arthur, to become a monarch. "So what do you think, 13? Metatron asked. "Do you want to take this chance to gain a portion of the strength and ability of a Magian Prince?" 13 didn't even need to think. Since he was limited to the rookie rank, he would take the risk of obtaining a power that no rookie had ever achieved in the worlds of Pangea and Solterra. "Do it," 13 replied firmly. "Good." Metatron nodded with satisfaction. "Although I promise that you will survive in absorbing this core, do understand that it is going to be very painful. I hope that you are prepared for pain." "I eat pain for breakfast," 13 stated. "As long as I don't die, nothing will break me." "Haha, I like to put that theory to the test." Metatron grabbed Arundel's core and pressed it over 13's chest. "Tell me, would you like to try dying once?" "Joke's on you, Metatron," 13 said as Metatron forcefully pressed the core into his chest. "I've already died once." The Magian core merged with the boy's body. 13 braced himself for the pain, but after waiting for several seconds, the pain that he was waiting for didn't come. "Ha ha!" Metatron laughed. "You should have seen yourself gritting your teeth so hard, ready to endure the pain. Actually, the Magian core you absorbed is your reward, so you won't feel any pain. In other words, the core has accepted you as its new master, so it will not hurt you. On the contrary, it will even allow you to gain its powers without any pain." Suddenly, several rows of text appeared in front of the 7-year-old, highlighting the skills and abilities that Arundel possessed. "You can only choose one," Metatron cautioned. "So choose the best." 13 read the information of the skills and abilities in front of him for several minutes, taking time to understand the pros and cons for using them. Arundel possessed many skills, so it took a while for 13 to read all of them. Metatron, who seemed to be happy to have someone to talk to, waited patiently for 13 to finish choosing. In the end, the boy decided to choose Arundel's signature move, which was called Disintegrator. That was the same ability that he used to completely erase the golden bolt that 13 had specially prepared for him. Congratulations! You have learned the skill, Disintegrator. Disintegrator. Once a week, you will be able to use the skill that can completely disintegrate anything you touch, leaving nothing behind. You can only disintegrate living creatures that are of the same rank or weaker than you. You are able to disintegrate any inorganic object, regardless of their rank. Golem constructs or any other artificially created life forms will also be disintegrated by this ability, regardless of their rank. A faint smile appeared on 13th's face. Although this skill could only be used once a week and was ineffective against living creatures who were stronger than him, it was still very useful because he could use it in many ways. Metatron also grinned. The boy didn't disappoint him and chose Arundel's strongest skill. Well then, you can now choose 2 more items from Arundel's collection. Metatron crossed his arms over his chest. After that, I will let you pick 1 item from the treasury of the apocalypse. So, be sure to choose only the best, okay? 13 didn't need Metatron to say that to him. Even now, he was busy checking all of Arundel's possessions, looking for things that he or his subordinates could use, which would help them greatly when they arrived on the main continent of Solterra. After going through Arundel's personal treasures, 13 decided to pick 2 things from them. The first one was a crimson ring, which he believed was a storage ring. All the storage rings in Solterra and Pangea had a storage space of 4 square meters. According to Metatron, the ring he picked was called the Ring of the Apocalypse and had a storage space of 200 square meters. Its storage capacity alone was more than enough for 13 to choose this item. But that wasn't all that the ring could do. It was a very special ring that had the ability to store both living and non-living things inside of it. All the members of the Order of the Apocalypse had this ring because of its usefulness. At first, 13 was in doubt, but after the Metatron said that he was allowed to return and exchange the ring for another item if it didn't meet his expectations, he decided to trust Metatron this one time. A storage ring that could store living creatures had strategic value in it. But what surprised 13 the most was the fact that the ring was a divine item. Divine items will not be affected by the restrictions that are placed on your vessel, Metatron stated. However, not everyone, especially those of the rookie rank and below, could use such items. Fortunately, this is a reward that a god has personally bestowed upon you. This means that regardless of your rank, you will be able to use it normally. Aren't you lucky, 13? Being part of the Order of the Apocalypse is nice, right? You get to acquire items of this level once a year, allowing you to bypass the restrictions of item ban and skill ban. 13 neither agreed nor disagreed with Metatron's words. But one thing was clear. Staying with the Order of the Apocalypse would allow him to grow despite the limitations that shackled him in place. Now, choose your last reward. Metatron crossed his arms over his chest. After that, we will visit the treasury so that you can gain 1 more freebie. I'm such a nice person, don't you think? Yeah, 13 replied casually. Very nice. Metatron chuckled after hearing the boy's reply and patiently waited for the 7-year-old to take the last item he was going to choose as his reward. After a few minutes, the boy reached out to 1 item in particular, which made Metatron arch an eyebrow. The Mantle of Flames, Metatron said. This red mantle will make you nearly immune to all kinds of flames, fire spells, and other abilities that fall under the fire element. But, since it is only of the legendary rank, it will still be affected by your item ban and skill ban. In short, aside from looking cool and imposing, the most you can use it for is a blanket or a bedroll. 13 nodded in understanding. The remainder of the items that Arundel possessed were of a legendary rank, so he couldn't really use them. Because of this, he simply chose the coolest item because the design of the Mantle of Flames made him look as if he was a little king. It even had a mane around the neck area, making it look imposing. Since he couldn't use any of the other artifacts, he simply mindedly chose the coolest looking one to make him look good in the eyes of others. Simply put, he chose it purely for aesthetics. Well, you can also give it to others if you like, so it's not really a bad choice, Metatron stated. I will also tell you 1 special ability of this mantle. It would allow you to walk over fire and magma, as if you were walking on land. It's truly an interesting item. The guardian of the treasury of the apocalypse clapped his hand, and the other items in front of them disappeared. Now, let's talk about the treasury that you're about to visit. Metatron waved his hand, and a giant black pyramid suddenly rose in the distance. The treasury of the apocalypse has 13 levels. At the moment, the first level is the only level you can access. However, as you gain more apocalypse points, you will be able to unlock the higher levels, which hold rarer items. What items can be found on the 13th layer? 13 asked. You're already eyeing the 13th layer? Metatron laughed before giving the boy a thumbs up. You sure aim high, 13. I like. The will of Metatron then looked at the highest point of the pyramid where the greatest treasure of all was located. The 13th layer only contains one item, Metatron stated. It is also the item that all members of the Order of the Apocalypse strive to get. It's none other than Pandora's box, the divine artifact that will open the doors of the apocalypse to the world. 13 frowned. He knew about Pandora's box and that it was indeed capable of bringing the end of the world, making the Order of the Apocalypse a very dangerous organization. But it's very hard to reach the 13th layer, you know? Metatron sighed. Even the oldest member of the Order has only unlocked the 6th layer. But I have a feeling that you will be able to unlock the other levels faster compared to them. Since you can only step into the rookie rank, the missions that will be available to you aren't as groundbreaking as the missions that the other members of the Order needed to accomplish every year. This is what you call being weak has their advantages as well. So, please, 13, work hard to unlock the 13th layer as fast as you can, okay? I'll tell you a little secret. Once the Pandora's box is opened, you'll be able to lock things inside of it. For example, you can lock up a god inside of it. Since we both hate fate, why don't you trap them inside of Pandora's box? That way, all lives in the world will no longer be dictated by their laws. 13's interest was piqued after hearing that Pandora's box could trap a god. Since he knew that fighting against his old man would be difficult, he could just trap him inside the box and toss fate inside of it to keep him company. Sounds like a plan? 13 smirked. Well then, how do you unlock the 13th layer? Good question. Metatron waved his hand, and several numbers appeared on each layer of the Black Pyramid. 102nd layer, 203rd layer, 404th layer, 805th layer, 1606th layer, 3207th layer, 6408th layer, 12800 9th layer, 25,610th layer, 51,211th layer, 102,412th layer, 204,813th layer. You'll need 100 Apocalypse points to unlock the second layer of the treasury, Metatron explained. 200 for the third layer, so on and so forth. As you can see, the difficulty for unlocking each layer jumps up considerably. So until now, only Camersepa has managed to reach the 6th layer. Metatron's revelation didn't surprise him. He believed that only Camersepa would be able to accomplish such a task. With her power of divination, she would be able to choose the best missions for her, which would allow her to gain many Apocalypse points every year. Well then, let's enter the first layer, Metatron said with a smile. There are no divine artifacts on the first layer, but there are plenty of legendary artifacts inside of it. I'm sure that you will be able to choose one that you can give to your subordinates, regardless of their rank. Regardless of their rank? 13 arched an eyebrow. You mean I can give it to a rookie and they can use the abilities of that item? Of course, Metatron replied. This is what you call bestowal. The members of the Order use these items to reward their subordinates who performed well. Can I sell it? 13 inquired. Of course not, Metatron answered. Any items that belong to the Order cannot be sold or auctioned away. Doing so will have your rights to enter the treasury revoked for 100 years, which will be a very sad thing, no? 13 no longer said anything and entered the treasury to choose one legendary item, which he didn't plan to use for himself. This time, it took 13 5 hours to go through all the items on the first level of the treasury. There were many incredible artifacts that were housed inside of it, and the 7-year-old had a very hard time deciding which one he would take with him. After nearly an hour of deliberation, he decided to choose a purple conch shell that could be blown like a horn. 13, you like to court death, don't you? Metatron didn't know if he should be impressed or disappointed by the young man's choice. "I don't plan on dying anytime soon," 13 stated, "but it will be best to have one or two trump cards if things go south. Are you sure that you want to pick that item?" Metatron inquired. "You will only be allowed to enter the treasury again after the night of the solstice. Will you not change your mind?" "No," 13 replied. "I'm fine with this." Seeing that he couldn't convince the 7-year-old to change his mind, Metatron gave up and closed the treasury once more. "Well then, time for you to go back to Soltura." Metatron crouched down to pat the boy's shoulder. "Remember this, 13. I am rooting for you." "Thanks." 13 smiled faintly. Whether he believed that Metatron was really rooting for him or not, he kept it well hidden inside his heart. The guardian of the apocalypse then snapped his fingers, returning the boy back to the world, where a black snake was patiently waiting for his return. A week after the battle ended, 13 found himself inside a makeshift tent, where the leaders of the different races had gathered for a meeting. Since the barbarian king, the orc king, and the troll king had died in battle, the people and monsters who would take their place were also invited to the meeting. Representatives of the other races were also there to serve as witnesses for the discussion that they would be having right now. "I wish to have a peace treaty with all of you present here in this room," King Atlas of the Tigerkins said. "There is no need for our people to fight against each other, especially after we have united against a common enemy. Also, even though we won the battle, there is no guarantee that someone with Arundel's strength will not set their eyes on the Valbera archipelago again. If the same thing were to happen, I would like to work with everyone to think of countermeasures to retain our freedom." King Atlas had always wanted to stop the senseless battles between the Tigerkins, the barbarians, and the orcs. Now that a perfect opportunity had come, he decided to make his opinion known to everyone. Of course, some of the king's advisors didn't like this idea. Since the barbarian king and the orc king had died, wouldn't this be the perfect opportunity to conquer the Valbera archipelago? All they needed to do was strike a deal with the ogre king, who had also survived the battle against Arundel, and they would become the supreme rulers of the two major islands in the archipelago. Seeing the reaction of the advisors of the Tigerkin king, Arthas snorted in disdain. In his hands was the thorniest sword, whom he had taken from the body of the barbarian king. Since they had lost their leader, he decided to take the position to ensure that his people would not fall into the hands of corrupt individuals who only wished for power. Of course, not all the barbarian warlords and city lords were happy with the current situation. However, they reluctantly accepted Arthas as their new king due to one simple reason. An alliance between the barbarians, orcs, tigerkins, ogres, and trolls is a good idea, 13 stated. It will prevent senseless bloodshed and allow the races to grow together. I'm telling you now, Arundel's buddies will definitely set their sights on the Valbera archipelago. If all of you don't work together then, after a few years, the same event will happen. By then, all of you will be reduced to nothing but slaves. No one will be the top dog of the Valbera archipelago because all of you will just be the lapdogs of a Magian prince or princess. 13th's voice was firm, as if what he said would certainly come to pass. This made those who were against the alliance reconsider their choices. In the past, they would have never taken the words of a child seriously. But, after everything that happened, they had no choice but to acknowledge the fact that the only reason why they were able to survive the calamity was due to the 7-year-old, whom everyone treated as a hero. In fact, the barbarians and the Tigerkins had started to make statues of 13 in their cities, hailing him as the guardian deity of the Valbera archipelago. Originally, they thought that he had died because, after he had been flicked away by Mammon, he disappeared for an entire day. However, while everyone was cleaning up the battlefield and reclaiming the dead bodies of their brethren, 13 had made his appearance, making his subordinates rejoice due to happiness. Will someone like Arundel really come here? The new Orc King asked. The possibility exists, 13 replied in a heartbeat. So, all of you must stand united to prevent them from having their way. Will you be staying on the island? Arthas asked. If you do, I can make you my right-hand man. You will be treated with honor and respect. I think you would serve better as my advisor than your right-hand man, King Atlas commented. How about it, Zion? Want to live in the Sumatran kingdom? The Ogre King, who was busy cleaning his nose with his finger, glanced at the 7-year-old and smirked. Want to be my food? King Gamara inquired. No thanks, 13 replied. I'm good. Shame. King Gamara sighed. 13 scanned the faces of everyone in the room before making a statement. A week from now, I plan to go to the main continent, 13 replied. There are people that I need to find, and I'm sure that they are not here in the Valbera archipelago. Do you have a ship? Arthas asked. No, 13 admitted. But I can build one if necessary. Building a ship from scratch wasn't really a big deal. As long as he had the materials, he could ask the barbarians and the Tigerkins to help him build it. Since there was a looming threat that another powerful being would set their eyes on the Valbera archipelago, the 5 kings of the different races signed a peace treaty and had the shamans of the 3rd island bear witness to it all. Since it was a sacred agreement, everyone planned to abide by the rule that they all agreed upon. With this, 13 would finally be able to leave the Valbera archipelago with some peace of mind. The Tigerkins have a merchant ship that can take you to the mainland, King Atlas said. We also do trade with them, so we have a fleet of ships at our disposal. I'm sure any of the captains will be honored to take you to your destination. Should I send them your message for you? Yes, and thank you, Your Majesty. 13 bowed respectfully. King Atlas nodded and patted the boy's shoulder. He planned to form a good connection with the 7-year-old, as well as Anwer and Percival, who had shown great potential. After the meeting ended, everyone returned to their territories in order to spread the news to their people that the war between the different races was officially over. They would now work together to share crafts, studies, and other technologies that could potentially elevate the progress of their territories. As for 13, he spent the days posing for artists who painted and sculpted his image. Everyone wanted to have his image inside their homes, like a lucky charm to ward off evil. Of course, his subordinates didn't allow their master to be the only one having fun, so they posed with him as well. In the end, at the center of the battlefield, where the Great War had just ended, a monument of 13, mounted on top of Giga Chad, was erected. Naturally, it was not only the boy and the Chad skunk who were immortalized there. Tiona, Blackie, Rocky, Hercules, as well as Anwer and Percival were included as well. After the Grand Monument was built, the names of those who had died in battle were written on 5 pillars that stood beside the statue. Because of this, 13 had to delay his trip for another week because the creation of the monument was something that everyone wanted. When the monument was completed, a plaque was placed below 13's statue, which read, "What you do in life echoes in eternity." The copyright god, who was looking at the scene, raised a yellow card. But the builders of the monument couldn't see him, so they continued to do what they wanted, unaware that a new generation god was looking at them with contempt. A week later, 13 stood at the port where the merchant ship that would take him to the main continent was docked. "Are you sure that you two want to come with me?" 13 asked Anwer and Percival, who had determined looks on their faces. "Yes," Anwer replied. "I believe that I still have much to learn. The main continent will be a good place to spread my wings. I also believe that I will meet many strong people in the main continent," Percival stated. "I want to see how I measure up to those strong people." 13 smiled faintly, because his villain and hero were growing up really well. The 7-year-old then pointed behind the 2 Tigerkins' backs, making them turn their heads to look in the direction where 13 was pointing. General Stark, Briella, and Chloe stood behind Anwer and Percival. "Both of you take care on your journey," Briella said as she hugged Anwer and Percival close to her. "The 2 of you are my sons, so make sure to return to me safely." Anwer bit his lips because he never thought that his adoptive mother would treat him as her son once more. One of his main reasons for leaving the Valbera archipelago was due to the fact that he felt ashamed for what he had done in the past. Because of this, he thought that he was no longer part of the Evander family. "The 2 of you can come home when you get tired of your journey," General Stark said as he placed his hands on Anwer's and Percival's head. "A home will be waiting for your return." Suddenly, Anwer felt someone hug him from behind, making his body stiffen. He didn't need to turn his head to know who it was, because there was only one other person who could hug him at this moment. "Make sure to return back safely," Cleo said as she rested her head on Anwar's back. "I'll be waiting, brother." "How about me, sister?" Percival asked, feeling left out. "Of course, you also come back safely." Cleo reluctantly pulled back from hugging Anwar and hugged Percival as well. "I'm sure that when you return, you will have become a better version of yourself, Percival." "Did you see it in your vision?" Percival asked with genuine curiosity. No comment. Cleo giggled before whispering something in Percival's ear. "Always listen to Zion. He will show you the path to greatness." Cleo then pulled Anwar toward the merchant ship because she wanted to say something to Anwar that she didn't want her parents to see and hear. 13, who had an idea about what it was, only smirked as he ordered his subordinates, who had decided to go with him to the mainland, to board the ship. The merchant ship was very large, so even Rocky, who was the longest member of his party, was able to fit properly. The two orcs, O1 and O2, who had been revived by the one, decided to follow 13 as well. Even the trolls, T1 up to T10, had decided to join the human boy on his journey to the mainland. To his surprise, Amory and the assassins, who had once tried to kidnap Briella and Cleo, had decided to follow as well. They wanted to stay as Anwar's subordinates and be his strength to challenge the unknown of the main continent. A few minutes later, Cleo disembarked from the ship, her face as red as a tomato. Although Anwar tried to hide it, the smile on his face was a dead giveaway, making the 7-year-old chuckle. "Goodbye, everyone," 13 shouted as he waved at the people who had come to see him off. "Let's meet again in the future." Countless people had come to see their hero off on his journey, and they all cheered and waved at the human boy who would forever remain in their hearts. The legacy that he had left behind would become the foundation that would elevate the strength of the Valbera archipelago to new heights. While 13 was saying goodbye to everyone, another person said his goodbyes as well in Pangea. Leventis family residence. "Are you sure about this, Christopher?" Michael asked. Currently, the chubby boy was kneeling on the carpeted floor with his head bowed. Arthur, who was seated on his throne, looked at the boy with a calm expression on his face. Christopher's former master, Terence, who had now become a rookie, looked at his retainer in disdain. "Yes, Sir Michael," Christopher replied with his head still bowed. "You know that a retainer of the Leventis family is not allowed to quit without a good reason, right?" Michael asked. "And yet, you still wish to break your vows and ties to our family?" A retainer who had pledged their loyalty and allegiance to a prestigious family would usually have to pay a heavy fine or be whipped 100 times before they were allowed to leave. Since Christopher was dirt poor and his mother was on life support due to the Leventis family's generosity, the only option for him was to be whipped 100 times. Usually, the one who would do the whipping would be the master, whom he had sworn allegiance to, which was none other than Terence. "Tell me, why do you wish to leave?" Arthur, who had been silent earlier, asked. "I'm very indebted to Master Terence, but after everything I've been through in Solterra, I realize that there is only one master who I wish to serve with every fiber of my being," Christopher replied. "And who is this person?" Arthur inquired. "Is he better than Terence?" "The name of the master I wish to serve is none other than Zion Leventis," Christopher replied. "He is the person I wish to serve." "Huh," Terence interjected. "You wish to serve that useless brat? Have you lost your mind, Christopher? I will give you one last chance. Swear your loyalty to me once more, and I will let this incident slide." Christopher, whose head was touching the carpeted floor, didn't even raise his head and made his declaration. "The only person who I want to serve in this lifetime is young Master Zion," Christopher stated. "I'm sorry, Master Terence, but I already made up my mind." "Fine," Terence sneered as he took out a whip from his storage ring. "Accept your punishment, then." Christopher braced himself to get whipped senseless by his former master. He only hoped that Terence would not actually kill him. The chubby boy knew that he couldn't break free from the Leventis family so easily, so he decided to grit his teeth and endure until he was whipped 100 times. As long as he would be able to officially become Zion's retainer, he was willing to go to hell and back, just to stand by his side. Since Terence was now a rookie, his body had become stronger than before. He had even absorbed the core of the rank 4 monster primate, giving him a boost in his physical strength. When the first lash landed on Christopher's body, a groan escaped his lips because Terrence didn't hold back. The place where the whip landed had torn Christopher's shirt, showing a reddened skin at the place of contact. Truth be told, Terrence was very angry inside after seeing his retainer choose to serve someone else. In order to make an example to the rest of his retainers, he planned to whip Christopher until the chubby boy was crippled. All the other members of the Levinus family were also present in the room, including the heirs and the geniuses of their family. The lashing of the whip reverberated in the surroundings, but no one said anything. They only looked at the pitiful boy, who was clenching his fists tightly, as traces of blood appeared on his shirt. Just as Terrence was about to whip Christopher for the 13th time, the doors of the throne room opened wide, making Terrence pause his whipping. There, 13th's father, Gerald, swaggered in like he owned the place and walked toward the chubby boy, whose pitiful state made his gaze become as sharp as a hawk. "Come, Christopher," Gerald said. "Since you are now my son's retainer, I'm taking you out of this place. Why do you need a bout of this branch family? They're so not worth it, you know." Christopher, who heard a familiar voice, teared up. But he didn't raise his head because he didn't want Gerald to be punished for trying to save him. Gerald's right hand was still in a cast, but he didn't hesitate to pick Christopher up with his left arm, holding him securely in place. "Well then, I'll be taking my leave," Gerald said as he turned around, carrying the chubby boy in his arms. "Where do you think you're going?" Arthur asked. "That boy is only getting the punishment he deserves for leaving the Levinus family." "Shut up, old man," Gerald said before glaring in Arthur's direction. "This boy is Zion's retainer. Are you sure you wish to offend my son?" "Oh," Arthur arched an eyebrow. "Since when did you have the guts to talk back to me, Gerald?" "Since now," Gerald replied with contempt. "What? You want a piece of me, old man? Let's take it outside." After facing off against a Magian prince, Gerald's worldview had changed completely. Back then, he thought that monarchs and thrones were the gods of the world. But after seeing how his son fearlessly faced off against Arundel, Gerald knew that he must not stand still and watch his son go to the battlefield on his own. His face off against Arundel made him understand the difference in strength. So after meeting an existence that was stronger than a monarch, Gerald was no longer impressed by the might of a mere throne. Also, even if Arthur fought him, he was certain that he would be able to survive. The reason? It was because he now possessed a mythical armor of his own, made from the scales of a rank 9 dragon sovereign. Hurricane was a rank 9 djinn, boasting an incredibly strong body that was near impenetrable. The only reason why it was defeated in battle was due to the fact that the Tigerkin King and the Ogre King were both using weapons made from thorniest body parts, which had the ability to give a rank 9 sovereign serious injuries. If Gerald were to face off against his father, he was confident that he would survive as long as Arthur didn't use the mythical weapons that he had crafted for him. Seeing Gerald's fearless gaze, Arthur couldn't help but frown because he could tell that the black sheep of his family wasn't the least bit scared of him. "Leave Christopher behind, or else," Arthur ordered. He needed to show everyone that the dignity of the Levinus family wouldn't be brushed off like it was nothing. "Or else what?" "Arthur." Callista walked inside the room with a smile on her face. "Come, I want to hear what you're going to say next." Gerald laughed internally at his old man. Of course, he wouldn't barge into the Levinus residence unprepared. Although he was confident that he would survive his father's tantrums, he still used his brain and went to his mother to ask for backup. With Lady Callista on his side, Gerald could move unhindered in the Levinus residence. "Callista, stay out of this," Arthur stated. "Fine," Lady Callista replied. "Gerald, I'll be living in your house from now on. I'll stay out of this place." "Good decision, mother." Gerald glanced at Arthur with a smug look on his face. "Let's go." The two left without even giving Arthur a backward glance. Terrence, who was feeling aggrieved because Christopher's punishment ended prematurely, looked at his grandfather with a face filled with injustice. "Grandfather!" "Silence!" Arthur almost roared in anger, making Terrence and the other retainers of the Levinus family cower in fright. Michael adjusted his glasses and sighed in his heart. Everything had become a mess. He had planned to stop Terence from killing Christopher when the chubby boy's life was in danger. Truth be told, he and his father, Arthur, didn't want to become Zion's enemies. Both of them had recognized that the 7-year-old was an abnormal existence. Due to Christopher's firm stance, it was very easy for them to deduce that he had met 13 in Solterra. Arthur stood up from his throne and walked out of the throne room, followed closely by Michael. "Father, where do you plan to go?" Michael asked. "I want answers," Arthur replied, "and I will get them." A second later, both of them disappeared as they ran after Gerald, Lady Callista, and Christopher, who were returning to their home near the base of the mountain.